Hello, everyone. And Bina, it's always an extreme pleasure to see you. I hope everyone has enjoyed themselves so far. Right now we had an incredible conversation during lunch about finances, financial planning. It was really something to listen to. And again, if you have the opportunity, if you were already eating, if you were napping, whatever you were doing during that lunch break, don't forget that you can still watch it online. My name is Corbett again, and I'm the Director of Community Programs and Governance at the University of San Diego's Nonprofit Institute. And Bina Patel is a good dear friend of mine. She's also the CEO of Saathi Impact. And Bina, since this is going to be a session together, but I would love for you to start off and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Lynn, and everybody. Really grateful to be here with important times and time together exploring and so many things. So before we get into it, I just want to give a minute to take a deep breath. I'm going to ask you all to sit back in your chairs, wherever you are. Take a deep breath in through your nose, breathe out. Maybe just relax your shoulders, wiggle if you need, and just get present. You're taking in lots of information, so I welcome you to take a pause and a deep breath to get situated here today. Great. All right, so what brings us here today is so many things, and I want to first just be really open with everyone. I was invited, and Lynn and I talked about, let's have a conversation around what's happening with the pandemic and COVID-19, and what are we seeing around equity in that context. And shortly thereafter, so many other things have unfolded around what's happening with racial injustices, policing, etc. And we put our heads and hearts together and decided to be responsive to this moment. So I welcome you into the conversation, and just know that we're not putting up slides. This isn't a formatted conversation. We're trying to be really responsive and adaptive to this moment, and it's ever emerging, and both of us are we need to explore as the complexity unfolds. Really quickly also, there'll be Q&A time, so please jot down your questions and feel free to send them in, because Lynn and I will be having a conversation for a bit and then open it up to your questions and do our best to support you where you're at. So take care of yourselves for the next hour. Deep breaths, find that open space, that open heart, creative mind. And as we get into it, I also just want to mention this is our moment for a lot of reasons. And when I say it's our moment, what I'm really pointing to is that the nonprofit sector, philanthropic sectors, private sector, faith sectors, and all of those that we serve in all of the different ways, this is our moment to be a collective, to find a way to contribute to a movement and show up not just in this moment, but in the longer term, to sustain different conversations. So we have the pandemic, unprecedented levels of unemployment and economic hardships. We have issues of food security, homelessness, housing instability. We have issues about, like I said, policing, power, public voice, kind of all of those things are happening. And while it can be really overwhelming and complex to find a space, you to think about how this moment tells us work in silos, that all of this is connected, that our well-being is interconnected to one another, and that in times of great complexity and change, there is an opportunity to contribute, to show up in it. And so while, again, it's big and overwhelming and painful for many different ways, I just offer to look for the opportunities, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Thank you again for having me. And Lynn, I've just shared a few reflections of this moment, and I would love to hear, and I'm sure others would love to hear, about what are you reflecting on in this moment?
Thanks, Bina. And Bina, we apologize in advance. Your feed is coming back just a little choppy at times, and we'll continue to support you. So if I interrupt you, that's why I'm interrupting you, to make sure you can make your point and people can hear you. This is an interesting time. I think America is in a crisis. I think, as I mentioned earlier in this forum, that this is also an opportunity for leadership. It's also an opportunity for a systematic change. And if this is the time, this is the moment for it. As I was reflecting on the situations that have been occurring, particularly in the San Diego area, something struck me that I wasn't earlier. I just didn't think about it this way, so I thought I'd share that. For those of you not from San Diego area, there was a gentleman who was standing at a bus stop, and a police officer approached him, and he and conversation ensued, and ultimately the gentleman was arrested. And there's a much bigger story there. I just want to get into give you an overall context. And then there was a situation in Denver, Colorado, at a space similar to a WeWork, where these gentlemen were in a gym, and one of the other people who has an office in WeWork, the three African American gentlemen, were in the gym, and the gentleman approached him and said, "Do you have an office here? Should you be here?" When both of those events happened, pretty much very close in the same time frame, I started thinking about how the many times in my life I felt like people approached me or walked up to me as if like I am at a space where I don't belong. So very similar to, so here we have a gentleman who's standing by the bus stop. Someone's going to approach him and say, "Why are you at this bus stop?" Sometimes when gentlemen are driving cars, and if they're pulled over by a car, or if they're approached by anyone, it's always like, "Why are you driving this car?" So it's always that we're doing something, and it's almost being stated that we don't belong. So I'm hoping that this resonates with some of you, but the other part here is that how do you think it feels on our side, my side in particular, to not feel like I'm in the right place? Or to be treated like I don't belong, or to be treated like my opinion doesn't matter. So that's why this is important too, because what if it was you, right? You want me to act as if you belong, and this is not directed towards any particular race. This is more of a general conversation that, not only that my life matters, but I matter. And I feel as if people are, we are initially being approached because there's a belief that we just don't belong. I was watching news the other day, and they were interviewing a gentleman whose business ended up being torched. And he was an African American male, and he says, this was my life, and I have to rebuild. I understand the issue. Sorry that my business had to be lost as a result, but I will rebuild. And I just thought that was incredibly powerful. Then the newscaster asked him, she says, "I know you have 3 African American boys. How do you tell your boys about what's going on about this movement?" And the gentleman responded by saying, "I thought I would never lie to my children, but I lied. I can't tell them what's going on." He said that the moment that a parent has to sit down with the child and tell the child that you are not perceived to be equal is the moment that a kid's childhood is over. You are not perceived to be equal is the moment in time that a childhood is over. And I just felt that to be very powerful, because those are the conversations that happen all the time. How we're approached by people, how we deal with things, but also about those that are often at times left behind. And Bina and I, when we started this conversation, that's what it was. It was about the pandemic, and it was about, what about those that are being left behind as a result of this? So Bina, I look forward to having a good conversation with you about this.
Yeah. Thank you, Lynn, for sharing all of that. Just to honor the experiences, those you talked about, and your own. So And I cleared all my Wi-Fi stuff, so I'm hoping it works. It worked in the testing, so you all out there, hang tight. The Wi-Fi's doing its best. So I will speak slowly and articulate, so hopefully it comes through. Okay. So yeah, just to offer thank you again for sharing that experience. And I think this moment is telling us something different about equity, about how we all get to show up, and that the space is meant to be bigger for us, not smaller. And what we're really trying to do is think about what are the conditions present already that tell people they don't belong. And that can be in healthcare with the outcomes of proportionate deaths and black indigenous. There's so many different that say you don't. It's not
Bina,
always
Bina,
explicit in someone.
You just broke up a little bit. Also, can you project a little bit? Because I'm thinking some people may be having a struggle hearing you. And if your phone is around your computer, move it away. Okay.
No, it is not. I promise.
All right.
Goodness, I thought I had all the instructions right. I'm so sorry. I did what I could. I'm in a condo building. So I just want to offer, I think this moment tells us to undo the conditions that say you have to show up a certain way to belong. And it's not always outward. It's not the police officer always. It's not those moments. It's in the healthcare system that says certain populations will bear the brunt of infection. It's in the workplaces of who gets promoted and who doesn't. It's in so many different ways that we start to see equity show up. So thank you for sharing that.
And Bina, if it's okay with you, if you would like to, you talked about what does this mean to the diversity, equity, and inclusion movement, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
It means so many things. Let me just say, it means all of the things. So first is, if you haven't started your DEI racial equity work, start. It's okay that maybe you haven't done the workshops, the readings, that you haven't put together the work, but this is the moment to invest in it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to advance, to think about in your conversations around anti-Blackness and use honest language in your work and undo.
I'll jump in just for a second, Bina, because you're choppy, and I love the way you started that. I think when I think about what does this mean, I think that the first step really is acknowledging that there is a problem, right? So some would say, well, I don't see a problem. Of course you don't, because you're not impacted by it, right? So if there is, let's acknowledge that there is a problem, that people are treated differently based on the color of their skin. And I'd like to say that we can agree that a black life should be equal to any other life. And if we believe that, then we can say, and we believe that it's not the case that they're being treated equal, we have to confront that and figure out what do we need to do to address that. One example for the city of San Diego, what they did was they contracted it out with someone and said, hey, let's look at all of our systems. Let's look how we give money out. Let's see if people are treated fairly, or if there's some systemic procedures in place that prevent this equity in the work that we do.
Absolutely. Well said. We need to interrogate the ways we label people and then give them conditions of if they can show up or not. Absolutely. That's right. Is it working? Is it getting any better? No.
Yes.
I'll do shorter answers, Lynn, and you jump in. We'll keep it moving. I just want to offer, right, that you got to start somewhere.
Yes.
And the most important piece is that you start honestly and you're willing to acknowledge the hard truths of this.
That's as I think about the word inclusion in the movement, I think about this hashtag that it's been going around today, and I believe it's called. I wrote it down because I misspoke it earlier, and it's called Black in the Ivory, hashtag Black in the Ivory. And it's this approach from today specifically, and of course it's something that's going on. It's this approach from medicine, across medicine, science, research, and academia, and people are sharing stories of situations that have occurred to them, that happened to them, and you would say, wow, this person has this job, they've fought this far, and the issue for them is definitely ties in diversity, equity, inclusion, but it also ties into this part of exclusion, right? So I saw my wife tweeted something sent a tweet out while I was here, and she has a PhD and she's been doing this work for a number of years, and she says a PhD in clinical psychology. Yes, people, please pray for me, but let me move on. But she sent a tweet saying that there was a time when I was there working hard, and my colleagues were meeting on research practices, on getting published, and when I asked could I be part of that meeting, they were like, no, you can't, because you're so busy working. And I know some might say, oh, well, it's just work, but it's this part of exclusion and seeing us, or some people that are as more of like they're regulated to this working location. You can work, and you can work hard, and you can perform, but when it comes to this and that, you're too busy working. So anything that could be thought of is one part. And I just thought that was, again, powerful, because I think that we have to be open and committed to having conversations. And Bina, you always talk about this, being open and committed to being uncomfortable, being so uncomfortable that we can be comfortable, right? And I was listening to a local police chief, and she was doing incredible work. And she says, because of this issue, she ended up meeting with every person of color in her department. And the things that she heard, how they're being treated in the department, but also how they're being treated in their lives and outside, she said she was astonished. And she is dedicating the next several years to making sure that this is changed. Right? I thought that was extremely professional. I thought it was a positive. My one question is that how come the systems aren't in place for them to share without this happening? Right? What systems are we doing that prevent this open environment, or that the conversation can't happen? And I've been in these meetings myself where I'm like, this is powerful, let's talk about it. And somebody says, this is not on the agenda. My response is, I bet 20 to 50 different people around San Diego right now are saying that's not on the agenda. Well, if it's not on the agenda, when will it be on the agenda? And I believe this is the time that it makes it to being agenda worthy, that we can sit down and we can have these conversations, and the time is now. So sorry, Bina, I just wanted to get that out there.
Great question. Oh, don't apologize. That's beautiful. I would follow up with whose agenda, right? Like, who's setting these agendas? And to go back to the concept, systems have often been designed to keep some people comfortable, to not challenge the norms, the ideas, what polite looks like, what protest looks like. And those are norms that have been handed down year over year. Our work is to recenter on progress. Focus on progress, not your comfort. So I would ask everyone who's listening, how do you keep yourself comfortable at the expense of people who are Black, Indigenous, and Brown, and people of colors? Where is that for you? What is the thing you're saying, like, that's not appropriate? Who taught you that? Whose agenda is it? And can we humanize each other in the process? that the agenda isn't about do that later, don't have feelings. The agenda is a mutual sense of what's the progress we need to make for everybody here. Great comment. Thank you.
Yeah, and you know, it's an extremely important point here that we start thinking about this being a monumental point in history, and what did we do to contribute, or what did we do to maintain the status quo? I love this quote by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who says, "There are protectors of the status quo." Right? When you're talking about change, there are protectors of the status quo, and this is our time to remain awake and alert and to embrace the process of change. I think that was very, very powerful. And I know towards the end, Bina, we'll have a chance and opportunity to take some questions, but I'd love for you to comment on, like, what does this look like moving forward? What does this look like in practice?
Yeah. Hey, look, there's no neutral. That's the reality. You're either trying every day for more justice, or you're bystanding to ongoing injustice. Those are the options. There is no neutral in this work. So I think your point of how do we show up is important. I would start by saying the question is to change from just listening, which is important to learn, to are we heeding? Are we taking new actions and different behaviors because Black, Indigenous, and people of colors told us so? So that's one thing. The other is to consider, again, like I said, where do your worldviews come from and what are you willing to change? Can you question, where did I learn that from? Who taught us that? Why do I believe this is right or wrong? And just start to question the very foundations of what we think society is supposed to look like. I think the last thing just in this moment really quickly to say on this, Lynn, is allyship is really important. And what that means is you don't show up next to me just right now, but you're going to show up consistently in the spaces that you are in to change them, to change the conversation, to open it up. And what I want to offer is that for allies, the first you need to feel, you need to feel it. Feel the rage, feel the pain, feel all of it, and then think, how can I be of service to healing?
And Bina, can you say that again? Because I think what you're saying here is powerful, and I want to make sure that everybody's able to hear that. Can you repeat that for me, please?
Yeah, I'm so sorry, everybody. I want you to feel everything. I want you to feel the outrage, the disgust, the pain, the hope. As an ally, your first step is to open yourself up to feel it all and then translate to, how do I be of service? How can I be healing in this moment? Allyship doesn't work if you can't tap into the pain that's present for others. That's empathy.
Yeah, that's. I definitely wanted to get that heard. Bina, you talked. I mean, you and I were having these conversations over the last couple of weeks. You mentioned something about how some of the people in your, as you consult to them, they're asking you some specific questions. Can you think about what specific questions those are and share them? Because when we look at it from a nonprofit perspective, when we look at it from a business perspective, I want people to walk away with some things that they can do in situations they hear. And while you're thinking about that, because I don't want to throw you on the spot, I do want to share one thing that I heard a couple of days ago, and I wish I could find out where I heard it, because I'd love to. It was this conversation where people said, well, all lives matter, so why are you talking specifically about Black Lives Matter? And, well, I talked earlier about if we can agree that sometimes that the treatment is not exactly the same. One way is to identify that if it's not the same, what do we need to commit so it is the same? That's one part. But the second part was this example that they used in regards to a house. All the houses on the street in a regular city block, wherever you live, all the houses on the street are equal the same size. but this one house is on fire. It doesn't mean that we're discounting the rest of them, but it does mean that we have to address the house that's on fire. And what we're saying now is that yes, all lives matter, but right now we've identified that our world is on fire, and and we need to give it the attention that it deserves. So thank you, Bina.
Yeah, amen. Say it again. Yes, all lives matter when all lives will matter. And when Black people are telling you right now, I'm showing you my life doesn't matter, sit down and listen, friends. That's our work, is we have to make them all matter. So thank you. Yes, Black lives matter. Exclamation point. So let's see, what am I seeing? I'm seeing a lot of folks say, we want to put out a statement. Yes, important, but do the work. So I'm seeing a lot of folks want to say they're in solidarity, or we really care about this moment. I want you to think about, what are your actions to back that up? That's the first thing. Let's see. One of the second ones is, how do we keep doing our work in this moment? And I want to offer that we need to create the space to let individuals show up and heal. You have Black people on your staff who are hurting. Let them do their healing work. You don't have to be there for it if you are not Black. Just let them have their space and they'll come back. Let white people do the space to explore what's happening together, to make it real. That's how you do this work for real, and it's not just a statement. Those are two of the big things I'm seeing right now. I'd say the last one, the last investing, is you have to put resources into your statement. So if your time and money aren't moving, you're not doing the work.
So you're saying putting, did you say dedicate resources to it? Is that what you were saying?
Yes.
Wow. Well, if that's a measurement.
Time and money.
Time, a measurement, two measurements right there that we've created. Time, measurement of time, and measurement of money, right? And if you're not investing in it, why would you expect to change? Very nice, very nice.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good. Well, we have some comments and we'll have some questions, Bina, and I'll facilitate by looking at some of the questions, and then I'll hope that we have the opportunity to get to all of them, and if not, continue to have this dialogue as well. So, Bina, one of the questions that I saw is that the individual who mentioned it asked something to the effect of how. To adding, they said when we mentioned that it wasn't on the agenda, they were like, bring a pencil, cross it out, and add it to the agenda, right? But that's not easier said than done. So I was just curious if, how do you feel someone could approach an environment about having this dialogue and having this conversation, because many of us are in fear of retribution. And I gotta tell you, that's real. Right? I mean, you know, if we bring up issues, we're seen as the angry person. We're seen as the person who keeps talking about the same thing. So I'm just wondering if you have any recommendations for people.
Yes. All right, Wi-Fi, stay with me. This is important. So the first thing is to find your allies. You don't have to do it in the most public spaces. If you are Black or a person of color, you decide what's safe for you. You don't have to do the work for everybody. You decide where you want to have this conversation and when. Yeah, that's the first thing. The second is,
can you repeat that last part again? I'd love to hear that one again. Can you repeat the last part of one?
So Black people and people of color, you decide when you want to do this. You show up when you want. It's on your term. You take care of yourself. That's the first step. The labor is first for you to take care of yourself. That's your first piece of work. Second is, do you want to do it with everybody? That's a decision for you to make. I think it's really important for leaders in this space to consider how they're carving out time and creating support. You might need a facilitator. right? You might need a speaker. You might need a reader guide. Any number of things. So don't do it by yourself.
Very nice. Bina, what you made me think about is just because I'm so big into governance, I think about some of the boards right now, and Board Source did a survey about the last 3 to 5 years. We've been talking about making some more nonprofit boards more diverse, and how everyone has been talking about it, but the data proves that there is no movement on it. All right, so people are mentioning it, people are talking about it, but there's no movement on it. So here you have a group that says, we will track it, we will measure it, we will look at the data, but the data is saying that we're not really focused on it as much as we thought we were. When I asked the group, what have you been doing? They responded, well, our bylaws, say we can only bring one person on every year, so we just haven't had the opportunity to bring anybody on. And my response is that those are the systems that need to be changed, right? Bylaws you can add people. You can say, you know what, I know we have 11 on the bus, maybe we should go to 13. I also know of a gentleman who said, you know what, this is so important to me that I'm gonna step down to open up my seat for someone. Right, so these are some examples of opportunities where people have said, if it means so important to us, what do we have to do to change the way? So, perfect.
Yes. Well said. Just quickly on that point, before you do diversity, figure out why you're not diverse.
Yes, very nice, right? You can stop there, right? Right? Say it, very, very nice there. Let me ask you this next question. Do you feel that the term diversity and inclusion allows people to check off the diversity box and then often fall short at inclusion?
Yes. Diversity and inclusion is comfortable language for white people predominantly. What we're really talking about is anti-oppression, anti-white supremacy, and anti-racism work. That's the honest work. Diversity and inclusion is not the culmination of this work. And they also don't include notions of power and identity very well. So I think if we can advance our language to be more honest, away from checking the box language, we'll actually see systemic outcomes. And I also just want to say, Lynn, to your earlier point, I want to ask the audience to reflect on what rule law will you break to save someone's life?
One more time, Bina. Ask me that one more time.
Yeah. What rule will you break to save a life?
What rule will you break to save a black life?
Yes.
Okay, good. That's a powerful question, right? An extremely powerful question. I have a question here that I find is important. It says here, any thoughts about institutional response and responsiveness when these social justice issues are no longer trending? I love it here. Any thoughts about institutional response and responsiveness when these social justice issues are no longer trending?
Yes, if you are in this work, speak to it in between the trends. Keep going. Every day, find a way to center this conversation about justice and inclusion. If you do it at the moments it's trending, you're not doing the work.
It's interesting. They were quoting what you said here, which is before you do diversity, figure out why you're not, diverse, right? And also what level of diversity that you seek, because there's often at times we realize that all the research is telling us you add one diverse person to a group, larger term diverse, they flourish. People flourish. It challenges the norm also. But I realize that what we're talking about is a black and brown issue, so I don't want to water that down. But I do want to say that the research and data is telling us that these actions make groups stronger. And I think we need to recognize that as well.
Yes. I want you all to think about is we often think like, let's get a diverse person. Why not 10? What is your thinking that says it has to be one person from community, one person who's Black, two people, two women? Why not all? Why not all? Think about the narrative in your mind that is putting boundaries on this work and open that up. Make more space.
It's interesting. I look at and reflect on the willingness of people to partake in this work, and also their ability to see what they can do different to drive this. And I think that what your point here is that this point in time right now is not about dipping your toe into the water. It's also not about being politically correct. It's just about being correct, right? And in order to do that, how do we step forward and approach every issue as if it's worth the utmost importance? Because that's how important our life is. What do the in-between conversations look like when social justice is no longer this is a same question asked a little bit differently, and it continues to talk about carrying this work forward. Do you have any ideas that about carrying this work forward? Let's say if I'm at my job and people stop talking about it, what are some ways that I can keep it trending, for lack of a better term, without people feeling here he goes again, here she goes again?
Yes. So one, again, allies, do your work and show up. Two, ask questions like, who did we include in this conversation? Who did we exclude? Who decided for us? So in between, the same way you think about what's the budget implication, I want you to think about what's the human implication. Who's being centered? Who benefits? Those are the questions you're asking in between. You can ask yourself at the end of an agenda, how did we do today on inclusion work? As a final reflection. Give people the space to reflect regularly and keep open space for learning. Integrate your work and your life together so that we can learn more about how people behave and show up every day, not just in the flashpoint moments. The last thing is understand that this moment is fresh and hot for some people. This work of anti-police, of protest, of inclusion, work of justice, and years before people showed up in this.
I'll ask you to say that. I'll ask you to just say that sentence one more time, please, for us.
Yeah, this work has been happening for hundreds of years. It's a flashpoint now that's new to some. I do this work every day. Some of us live this every day. The request is, will other people finally live it every day? Show up every day. It's not new. We do this every day. The system is not neutral.
Yes. I have a good friend of mine, his name is Sean, and he said, he says he calls some moments when he's treated a certain way, he calls it Tuesday. And I said, well, why do you call it Tuesday? He says, because it's just like every other day of the week. He's like, don't act like it's today. He says, I'm treated this way all the time. I'm treated this way at my place of work. I'm treated this way when I go into a store. I'm treated this way on my drive home. So he says, it's just another Tuesday. So again, I look at it at the opposite side, is imagine as if you have to live your life that way. Would you want to live a life that way? Would you want your child to live a life that way? So just a very, again, interesting point from somebody I found to be, I respect very much. Bina, I do have another question here. How do you have these conversations with folks that are not used to talking about these difficult problems, or they don't think there are problems?
Or those are two different people. Okay, so the first is what in your helps you understand what's.
And
Yeah.
I'll ask you to
What
say it
in
again, and
your
I'll ask you to
experience?
say it again, and I'll ask that question again. Folks that are not used to talking about these difficult problems or don't think there are problems. And go ahead, Bina. You were breaking up a little.
Yeah. Why is this hard for you? I would ask them, what is your experience that makes this challenging? You need to start somewhere. That's one. Two is ask them, like you said, Lynn, I wonder what it feels like for them. What does it feel like? The third is if you say nothing, nothing changes. So you have to start speaking new stories to people who are not used to them. You have to change the news station. You hear me on this one? Change the news station. That's the first thing. Listen to different podcasts, read different books. Think about who's in your ears and who's in your eyes. So people who aren't used to this, let them experience new voices and new stories.
Very nice, beautiful. That's just a strong point of the way to address that. I like this next question here, because the gentleman asks is like, how do you handle the fatigue at work? How do you handle the fatigue at work and always being the example, the teacher representative for these topics, right? So it's almost like, I told somebody I was doing a diversity talk, and they were asking about a specific part of it, and I was joking at the time, but I said, because I'm black doesn't mean that I'm the diversity expert. Right? I'm learning along this way too. And honestly, there are people that are being treated. So I have to ask myself in that same realm, like, how do I need to act differently? How do I need to approach it? And which ways am I acting during this period of time as well? And always being the example, the teacher, and the representatives on these topics, how do you handle the fatigue at work?
Again, you choose. White people show up. If you're black or brown, you get to choose. Okay, that's the first thing. Two is take care of in this space. So say what you need to say, not what they need to hear.
Gotcha.
Right? Be honest for you and say what you need to say, not what they need to hear. Two different things. The last thing is just choose your lane. You can't do it all. And the problems are everywhere all the time. So choose your battles. Don't take the bait all the time. It's too much. It's all the time this is happening. So you choose when you want to show up. That's what I would say is the biggest tip.
Very, very strong response. This question gets into a little bit of a different area here. Is it possible to truly dismantle white supremacy within institutions while still maintaining traditional hierarchical structures, even with the BIPOC at the helm?
Wow. That's a great question. Great question. Okay. Black and indigenous people of colors perpetuate white supremacy also. For different reasons, but it happens. Not the same privileges, but it happens. So we can change white supremacy if we're willing to, all of us, black, white, indigenous, people of colors, all of us, we go up in it, all of us. Can change systems, start with the, not the system.
Say that last part again, Bina. It was just at the end there.
Sorry, you have to implicate yourself and show up as a human in the system, no matter your color, and ask, Lynn, what you said, what am I perpetuating? Is it oppression or is it justice? So no matter your color, that's the question, and that's how you dismantle it.
Very interesting. You make me think about this situation that occurred where someone was talking about an issue with their supervisor. I was doing some coaching with them, and they said, well, we didn't get around to it. And I said, oh, well, it wasn't that important to you. If you didn't get around to it in your agenda, then it wasn't that important. And they were like, well, it's about my development. And we just ran out of time. And well, it wasn't that important. right? Because it's at the end of the agenda when the meeting is almost over, right? So how important is it, and how are you willing to show up to have those conversations? We have a gentleman, Benjamin, says, I think now is the time to educate folks on the fact that anti-racism and anti-oppression work isn't a trend. It exists beyond the confines of this moment. And there might be a little bit more, but it ended on that one. You said absolutely?
Absolutely. Yes. It's all the time. There's no neutral. And the beauty in that horror is you can do something every minute of every day. You can change your agendas. You can move from caring so much to doing so much. That's a big shift. You can choose to make different decisions all the time to do the work of liberation, inclusion, and justice, and not oppression. The 2 minute of the day.
Bina, can you say that last part again? Do the work of you started with oppression. If you can just finish that last statement for us, that'd be great.
Or liberation. You can choose. The choice is yours every minute of every day. What will you choose?
You know, as questions are still coming in, I wanted to just throw out there is that there are people who've asked the question, you know, I have a little boy, I have a little girl, you know, I'm at high risk for, catching something, so I have to be careful about being around groups of people due to the pandemic. But the question is that what can I do if I'm not able to show up in protest or a march? Are there other activities that I can do that show that I'm in, that I'm concerned about this and that I want to see change?
Absolutely. Yeah. You can, the march is one small way, even though it looks big right now, it's small in the sense of where the change opportunities are. Donate, so give some money. Use your wealth to purchase things differently. Don't keep buying from white institutions or white-led businesses. Buy from Black-owned businesses and companies. Talk to your people. You don't need to live in places of diversity to find racial justice work. Because when you live with all white people, racial justice work is right in front of you. That's where you do the work. So start talking in your neighborhoods, start talking in your communities. And if people aren't outraged, ask them, why aren't you outraged? The word.
Yeah, if they're not
so you have
outraged, sorry, if they're not outraged, ask them, why aren't they outraged?
Why?
Very nice.
Yeah, so donate, use your money differently, use your platforms on social media and at work to talk about different things, and go get your people. Start having new conversations, and you be the catalyst for the movement. In your circle, at your church, at work, wherever you are, the conversation matters for everybody, no matter your color.
You know, Bina, when you say this, no matter your color, I'm going to ask this question just a little bit differently, which is, I saw something go out on one of the social media outlets saying that, you know, is it okay to talk about Black Lives Matter on my profile, on my LinkedIn profile, on my work, and how will that impact my job? And someone responded that they would never do that. And I was just wanted to know from you is like, you know, there's a portion of putting yourself out there, and then there's a portion of putting yourself out there. And I just want to get your thoughts on that.
If you are white, then yes, everywhere. Risk something. Change the spaces you're in. If you are Black or a person of color, I want you to choose first what sustains you in your livelihood. Bias is out there, and we know this. Black people will seem angry and political. White people will seem like they're allies and they're speaking up. The perception is different. So white people, yes, every single place you can, you talk about it as an ally. That's your work. For Black people and people of colors, you choose what takes care of you best. You don't have to prove anything to anyone about how woke you are when you're Black. It's a color.
Say that last sentence again for me. It just cut out at the end. Sorry.
Yeah. You don't have to prove anything if you're Black. That's it. You don't have to prove how woke you are. You don't have to prove it on LinkedIn. You take care of yourself and find a different way to serve the movement.
I love that term, of almost respecting the person where they are, and in allowing it to be on their terms. Because often at times there's some systemic pressures that don't allow it to be on their terms. And I'm so proud and happy to hear that it should be on their terms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's complex, right? Like, it's a hard situation, and literally your job is on the line. I mean, that's a decision to make.
So I heard you say that literally your job is on the line, and then I didn't hear the rest. If you can add that for us, please.
Oh, sorry. So you Black and brown people, you decide. That's the point. Is like, there's no one who has the right way to show up.
Very nice. Very, very, very nice. Thank you for that. I have a couple of comments about how some of the responses are powerful, and then another person said that they are enjoying this conversation, and I think I'm enjoying it, and I thank Bina for helping us out. I think we maybe have a couple of one more question or one or two more questions if we can squeeze them in, because I think this is important for them. The question also is in regards to how often do you feel as an individual that if there's one thing in saying it's on your terms and it should be on your terms, and then there's another part of feeling like, I don't feel I'm not that person to speak out. Right? Often at times people see you being quiet. They say that doesn't mean that you don't care. That doesn't mean you don't think about it. That doesn't mean that you're automatically now put in this place where you're the person to carry the torch. So what happens when you're not the person to carry the torch? And you mentioned about from a helping and donating standpoint, but I was just thinking about it when you're often at times the only person of color sitting around that table. Sometimes you're in a difficult position. That's
the reality. We're called upon always to do the labor, to educate, to hold space. It's real, and it's hard. Again, for me,
I'll ask you to just say that again, Bina, because I think your response was again, it was right on, and I'm learning alongside you, so I want to make sure that I receive this. Go ahead, please.
So it's real, and there's not a straightforward answer. Honestly, it's real that we do the labor. So white people need to show up more. And I asked, can I do it with love right now? If I can't, I'm out. It's not my space to do the work. That's how I determine, should I say something right now? If I'm going to yell, if I'm going to scream, if I'm going to hurt myself and the cause, the mission of speaking up, I don't speak in that moment. So I try to find a different space to show up. But I just want to honor it's real, and there's not one answer.
It's interesting because that word hasn't come up yet, the word love. There's a group of, there's a book, The Leadership Challenge, that talks about lead by Kuzes and Posner, and they do some great work. They're all over. They do 360 assessments, etc. But there was one thing that they look at, the 5 practices of effective leaders, and one of them is love, right? Love for the work, love for others. And there's a portion of this that comes with loving compassion for others, right? For where they are, for what they're going through. And it's not sympathy, right? But it's loving compassion for others so that this equity work can continue.
That's right. Love is the change. That's how we make change. Love of change. The master's tool of fear and hate and oppression will not create justice. That's our work here. We have to find the space for love to create change, as the master's tools will not create change that we need.
Someone mentioned about a reference to bell hooks. Just got it for their whole staff. And then there were a couple of people that mentioned some other resources that they put into the chat there, so for others. And although we're going to end this session here, Bina, is there anything that you're thinking about that you want to add? Colton also added here about choosing the resources and loving kindness, being able to change the world. But is there anything else that you'd like to make sure that we capture or people walk away with?
Yeah, thank you. There's so much. This is the beginning and the continuation. So carry on. If you are Black in this conversation, I want you to go take care of yourself right now. Like right now, I want you to go do what you need. If you are white or a person of colors, I want you to commit to taking an action. What can you do to advance how you show up? Read something, learn something, say something, give something. So if you are Black, go take care of yourself. If you are white or a person of color, go do something. And thank you for having me. I'm really sorry it was a bit painful with the Wi-Fi.
We were able to get the main points across. I think that the person who spoke here, her name is Liza, and I think she asked the question earlier. She says, "Love is our weapon." Right, and I think that is powerful. Someone else mentions the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house, warrior goddess. So there's so much work that's going to continue after this. Bina, I want to thank you as always. I enjoy every opportunity I get a chance to kind of hang out with you and talk about this work. I'm much appreciative, and you continue your work. It's extremely important. You present it in a way that people can truly understand it. So I just thanks for this opportunity for being with you again. So I wish you well, and we'll talk again soon. For everyone else who's been joining us today, we thank you for all of the work that you're doing out there. We thank you for being open to this conversation. We thank you for picking up the mantle here and saying that something has to be done. And for those of you that have been going through this, and I know you've been there, you've been doing the work, you continue to do the work. I say you are still needed more than ever. And the people who haven't touched this work, never thought about it, I think it's time. Now is the time, no better time there is. So thank you all very much, and your next sessions